Hey guys, I'm Jordy, and this is your guide to the flesh beast with the upset tummy, the sometimes patchwork-like Festergut.
I not feel so good.
A lot of people consider Festergut a DPS race gear check because of his 5-minute enrage timer and heavy healing required. I'm going to tell you, it's not really. With modern strategies and proper planning, you should be able to get this guy week 1 with a little work and some know-how. As far as raid composition goes, you're looking at 2 tanks and 5 healers. This is a very healing intensive fight, so moving up to 6 healing if you seem to be struggling is an option, but shouldn't be necessary. Alright, so Festergut has a few abilities, but let's talk about the main mechanic, Gaseous Blight. About 5 seconds into the pull, orange gas will fill the entire room and start ticking on your raid for significant shadow damage. This starts off ticking for about 6,500 damage unmitigated every 2 seconds to everyone in the raid. Now about 30 seconds later, Festergut will lean over and begin to inhale some of the gas in the room, reducing the damage the gas does while increasing his melee damage and attack speed by 30%. This continues for another 30 seconds or so when he'll do it again, reducing the amount of gas in the room and the damage it does and gaining another stack of inhaled blight, then one last time up to 3 stacks where he's swallowed the gas completely. At this point, he's hitting the tank extremely hard and fast, but the raid is taking no damage, so all focus can be on the tank. 30 seconds after he gets that 3rd stack, he'll fart out the gas he swallowed, doing a raid-wiping amount of damage to the entire raid. More on how to avoid that later, and refilling the room with gas, resetting the fight to its initial state. This is the cadence of the fight. Starting with lots of raid damage, and over time as he swallows the gas, increasing tank damage until the damage has completely swapped, and then in a massive explosion, resetting the damage to where we began. Alright, other than that, there's a few other things you've got to manage. First, Vile Gas. Every 20 to 40 seconds, he'll target 3 non-melee targets in the raid and hit them with this, doing between 6,000 and 7,000 damage every 2 seconds, but more importantly, causing them to lose control of their character and throw up for the duration. This also splashes to anyone standing too close, so spreading out is critical for this. Next, Malleable Goo. Putricide watches from the balcony above and tries to help Festergut out every so often by throwing green goo at the raid. This is telegraphed by a green circle on the ground. Just move out of it when you see it and you won't get hit. Melee, this can target you, so similar to how we did Algalon, you all want to stack on one foot of the boss, and once Malleable Goo targets the ground, you all move to the other foot, and so on for the duration of the fight. Okay, now remember how I mentioned that Festergut has swallowed all the gas in the room? He'll eventually get such an upset stomach that he'll fart splosion all over the raid for a raid-wiping amount of damage? Well, fortunately, you've got a way to avoid this. Every 40 seconds or so, he'll place a debuff called Gas Spores on 3 people, where you'll be able to see 3 big orange spores above them. After 12 seconds, this spore explodes on the player and anyone nearby with a target limit, doing about 4,000 damage per second to anyone hit for 6 seconds, but also applying a debuff called Inoculation that reduces your shadow damage taken by 25%. So, you can see where this is going. The raid needs to stack under the people with spores fast enough that when the spores pop, it applies this inoculation debuff that reduces damage taken by up to 75%, so that when he does decide to explode and deal about 80k shadow damage on the entire raid, you have enough stacks of this to not all get one shot immediately. We'll go over in the walkthrough the best way to do this, but just know it's critical that no one in the raid misses a single application of this debuff. It's a graceful dance of stacking, spreading, and restacking as the room empties of gas until the explosion, and then we reset. And finally, there's a tank swap mechanic that you need to be mindful of in the stacking gastric bloat debuff. Every 10 seconds or so, he'll apply Gastric Bloat, doing damage but also increasing damage of the target by 10%, stacking up to 10 times. If the target gets that 10th stack, they'll explode and more than likely wipe the raid. Now, a paladin can bubble this debuff off, giving you extra time to pump, so just watch your debuffs and taunt when the other tank gets to 9. Okay, that's really it for the mechanics on Festergut. Let's get into the walkthrough and talk about how it works in practice. On pull, we run in and lust. You can actually pre-spread around the room by hugging the wall, so do your best to place the raid in a semicircle around the boss to avoid chaining vile gas to more than the people that are targeted. Raid damage a few seconds into the pull is very high once the gas fills the room, so pump hard and keep the raid up. Alright, 20 seconds into the pull, the first 3 gas spores will be applied to the raid. Your goal here is to have 2 distinct range stacks and a 3rd melee stack. You need to assign 2 people as the stack point for the ranged. We like using Holy Paladins as they need to stand still to cast most of their spells, so having them planted the whole fight helps. The spore people need to quickly identify where they should move. If one is in melee and 2 are in ranged, that's simple. The melee person stacks on the tank with the rest of the melee while the ranged people move to each stack point and plant their feet. Once the spores expire, the raid needs to respread immediately to avoid the vile gas spreading. Now, if 2 people in melee get the spore, they need to very quickly communicate who's going to run out to the range stacks so that the spore gets dropped off there. I highly encourage you to work to keep comms clear on this and let those people talk it out. I'm sure weak auras will help solve this problem eventually, but until that time, think on your feet and manage those spores. Communicate and work on getting 3 stacks of inoculation up on every member of the raid. If someone does miss a debuff, you can have them try to use a cooldown to survive, but not everybody will be able to. Stack tight under these, the range is pretty small. So, the 3 spores pop, the entire raid moves back to their normal positions, and the fight continues. As Festergut inhales the gas, the damage he does to the tank increases. At 2 stacks, your tanks need to start using cooldowns to avoid getting quickly beat down, and at 3 stacks, they need to have something rolling the entire time. He's the single hardest hitting mob in all of ICC at this point, and needs huge cooldowns to survive. Eventually, he'll telegraph that he's casting Pungent Blight. During this, you should cast DSAC and AM Shadow. It's still a lot of damage even with the inoculations, so work to reduce it. Once it does go out, Divine Hymn helps a bunch to top the raid back up, and the fight resets. Raid damage is now high again, tank damage low, so plan accordingly and keep the raid up. The fight continues this way, stacking for spores, spreading for vile gas, tank swapping when necessary to avoid 10 stacks of the gastric bloat, and after 5 minutes he enrages, so pump hard and down he goes. Congratulations. Alright, let's talk about some tank tips. It's super critical you and the healers have a plan for the damage that Festergut's going to ramp into. Hand of Sack, Salve, D-Sack, Shield Wall, Pain Sups, whatever you can lined up to prevent getting ripped apart by him, especially during that 3 stack of Inhaled Blight. Also remember, if you're a pally tank, you can taunt Bubble off that gastric bloat. This extends your time that you can tank considerably and kind of trivializes that mechanic, so consider it if you can. For some healer tips, you're going to want to plan out your cooldowns with the tank to help keep him up, but you also need to plan raid damage mitigation cooldowns when the gas is highest in the room. We like to DSAC and AM Shadow the Spore Explosion dots, and absolutely make sure you have both running during the Pungent Blight explosion. It's the single largest application of damage on the raid, and mitigating it will help a bunch. And for the DPS, there's not a ton to worry about here, just make sure you don't get hit by the malleable goo on the ground, and range stay spread for vile gas. And be sure that you get stacked under those spores. You can't afford to miss one, as it will enable you to survive the Pungent Blight explosion. Popping defensives during that will also help a lot. Okay, well that's it for Festergut. Once he goes down, turn the valve in his room to send the gas from the tanks towards Putricide. If you learned something from this guide, do me a huge favor and like and subscribe. It helps me a bunch in growing the channel, and I appreciate it a lot. I've also got assignment sheets and a Phase 4 loot prio guide that I did with Pummel out now on mine or his Patreon, so if you're interested in those, check out the links below. And huge thanks to all the people that are supporting me on there. I appreciate you guys a lot. Alright, that's it for me. See you in the next one.
Hit X is really low in mana.
Yeah, bro. Hit.